Hi, good morning all you YouTubers and wastecasters. I'm going to make a bit of a maybe slightly lengthier video today. I just had quite a great interaction in the corridor just outside my door with a couple of members of staff. There's this one chap who's a support worker. He's really lovely and he's got a very warm, engaging character. We play pool, he's quite good at pool, and since I got this photo ID which says service user, everybody is similarly unique. For some reason it's backwards in the camera, fuck knows why. It's raised a couple of kind of laughs with the staff. They sort of said, why are you wearing an ID saying a service user? And I sort of said, well, if there's any, don't want to use the word disambiguation again, but if there's any sort of, confusion about maybe people dressing similarly to me, which kind of like it feels in my perception, hopefully that will be inaccurate, that people have been sort of dressing quite similarly to me, descriptively similar, which is a bit weird. I'll just say, they can just say, oh, I'm dressing as them, because they wear these badges. Or in fact they don't, the point being. So the guy said, he's sort of smiling, said to me, Brody, let me see that ID. What have you got there, bro? What are you wearing? Let me see it, please. And I said, I tell you what, I had an interaction with a doctor the other day. If you've seen my other YouTube videos, you remember that I had an interaction with a doctor and I had a bit of a dispute, an altercation, or an impasse I reached with the doctor who was trying to give me some pain relief after I'd suffered some severe dental pain. And he was going to prescribe me, I think, codeine, and they called in the doctor to prescribe. The nurse on shift, the RMN, called in the doctor, and it was an on-call doctor. It was at the weekend when the normal doctors weren't around. And I asked for the doctor's ID. Initially he said, yep, fine, you can have it. And then when I asked him again, he said, no, I'm not going to, because I was on the GMC website he said, no, I'm not giving you my ID, I'm not going to give you my name, and I won't give you my GMC number. Anyway, when this friendly chap and his colleague, who wasn't quite so friendly, asked me to see an ID, I sort of said, no, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to hide it from you, because that's what the doctor did to me the other day. And I was about to explain to him, because I asked the doctor for an ID the other day, and they wouldn't tell me their name or the GMC number, which is like perverse and absurd in any sort of medical context, patient-doctor relationship. Ask anybody who knows what they're talking about. It is just best practice. It's not like the law. I did research it. I thought it would be in law. Anyway, so I sort of started to explain this interaction with the friendly guy, and I was like, yeah, no, so, I'm going to hide it because like the doctor the other day, he hid it, and, I didn't really think that was cricket. And this other guy interjected and said, no, that's personal confidential information, bro. He doesn't have to give that to you. And I said, excuse me, what did you say? He said, that's personal, that's confidential information. You can't ask for that, it doesn't have to give you that. And I said, what gave you that impression, mate? And he said, well, I just, it's personal confidential information. You don't have a right to that. And I sort of said, I put it to him that he was in the wrong, I said, that's not right, mate. I don't know where you got that impression from, but just supporting, assuming or lying, which he must be doing. He can't can't think that it's okay for a doctor to withhold that information or deemed acceptable. Like it's in that circumstance that I'd explained. It's fairly binary. You kind of ask any doctor. Most doctors I've ever asked, I've done it probably 10, 15 times in my life, asked for a GMC number. They've all said, yep, fine, of course you can have it. Got out a pen, written it down for me. And this guy sort of started to create a kind of a false logical dichotomy to support his position. He started saying, I said, actually, mate, where's your ID badge? You're not wearing an ID badge. And he said, well, I'm just not wearing it. And I said, well, you have to wear it as well, actually, mate. He said, well, who says? And I said, well, I saw a job description. I don't know the Signet policy, staff policy on ID. I couldn't put in a freedom of information request to get that policy because they're a public sector, not a public sector company, they're a private sector, which is a whole different kettle of fish and a different avenue to look at privatisation of the mental health industry. But yeah, like I read a few months back, I was trying to find out the policy on this, and I found a Signet job description, and in the job description it says that one of the things that you'll be expected to do is to wear prescribed uniform and photo ID whilst at all times in clinical areas as part of the bullet pointed like mandated job description. So I said, no, it's in your job description, bro. And he just sort of said, well, I choose to do different in it. And I said, what did you say, mate? He said, I choose to do different in it. And I said, you choose to do different in it. Right, so you're supposed to have a photo ID, but you choose to do different in it. And you're suggesting to me that I was in the wrong asking a doctor for ID, maybe just to support him as, you know, one of your colleagues, or maybe sort of toe the party line. But he started asking me about my education. He said, where did you go to school, mate? What are you studying? What's your qualifications? How do you know? And I explained, he interjected at that point after I told the story that what I'd done to the doctor is asked him very politely to see his ID. At first he said yes, then when he saw me on GMC he said no, wouldn't show me the ID badge, started sticking it under his armpit and refused to give me his GMC number. And the guy sort of said to me, you know, what do you think, you know, makes you right? Like what's your qualification? What did you study at college or uni? And I said I studied drama and theatre arts, business studies and film and video at Exeter College, which I did. I never finished those AS levels, but I did study them for a bit. And so he started to say, so you never went to university, so you don't know what you're talking about. I kind of tried to create this sort of, this kind of like illusory dichotomy paradox between us, where he was trying to sort of reduce the substantiating credibility from my assertions, even though he was in the wrong, based on the fact that I didn't have a formal education. And just to be clear, look, here's what Gemini says. I've just Gemini'd it. So Gemini says, I asked Gemini, do I have a right to ask a GMC registered doctor practicing medicine in the UK to verify their qualification status by asking the name or GMC number? And it says, yes, you absolutely have the right to ask a doctor practicing in the UK to verify their qualification status by providing their name or General Medical Council number. Here's why. Public register. The GMC maintains a public register of all doctors licensed to practice in the UK. This register is designed to allow patients and the public to check a doctor's registration status and other relevant information. Transparency and trust. Asking for this information is a reasonable request, promotes transparency and helps build trust between patients and healthcare professionals. Patient safety. Knowing that your doctor is registered with the GMC assures you that they have met the required standards of training and are fit to practice medicine. Checking credentials. You can use the doctor's name or GMC number to search the online GMC register to confirm their registration status, including their registration type, e.g. full or provisional, whether they have a license to practice, any conditions or restrictions on their practice, their medical qualifications and specialities is available. How to verify? Ask the doctor, which is what I did, and he said no. The most direct way is to simply ask the doctor for their name and GMC doctors. Most doctors will readily provide this information. GMC online register, you can then go to the GMC's online register using the name or GMC number. Like I said, when I did look it up, it is just GMC best practice, like good medical practice is their document. The GMC are a little bit rubbish actually, like they don't kind of, when I've tried to message them about my right to record, they have signposted me to like the grievance. You can raise a grievance and they've got like an email address, and with respect to them I haven't done that because they're probably not going to change their tack on it and they're now trying to move me into a different rehab. But yeah, like I kind of explained that I thought it was a bit of an injustice that the doctor had, at my last ward round, this impasse with doctor who eventually, they gave me his name. I've got it written down on a piece of paper. There it is, there's the bit of paper. The other doctor came in, I won't show it to you. I haven't, got a problem with this doctor. He was very polite up until the point he just became a vacuum of transparency and accountability, which may be very circumspect, but I remained polite and acted with decorum and integrity and sort of like didn't have anything against him. I wanted the painkillers, and I wanted him to treat me, and I wanted to just simply verify who I was being treated by first. But I put it to a minute ago in the corridor, like the guy who was sort of like saying I was uneducated and a fool based on his what can only be just like an assumption. It's like I put it to him, it's a bit like saying the moon is made of cheese, saying that you think that the doctor's got a right, you know, to confidentiality. You know, if the doctor was wearing a balaclava and I was a woman and he was having a syringe in his hand and you were asking for his GMC number and his photo ID and he wouldn't show it to you, people might look at it a little bit differently. I can be forcibly injected in this hospital, and refusing to show your photo ID or having a GMC number isn't like kind of allegorically or kind of metaphorically in a similar way different from wearing like a burqa or a balaclava. You know, if he was wearing a balaclava, no one would be saying that's appropriate uniform. But anyway, I digress. This guy just sort of came with this complete logical fallacy, then tried to tell me that I was uneducated and a fool for trying to suggest that I knew what I was talking about because I'd made a totally reasonable, proportionate request, just acting to defend him. I want to read you something I wrote on Facebook the other day. There's been a bit of a confusion with my Facebook post because they keep on...
I think we're all as dull as ditch.
Joanna Lumley, because they all kind of seem to be really slow. Like when I'm sharing stuff on Meta, if I share an Instagram post, it pops up on Threads and Facebook, but not on Instagram for hours. So this one got posted like twice or something. Here we go, about confirmation bias. Just want to read this for all the people that don't know me on Facebook. I used to have about 2,000 mates on Facebook. I've got about 200 now. Most of them are people I deleted when I was paranoid and thought that they were kind of like treacherous, duplicitous traitors when I wasn't very well. And probably other people who've just deleted me because I post loads of conspiracy theories and shit they don't want in their newsfeed. But like, if you are somebody who's ever met me and thinks they might want to be associated with me or be my friend, which is probably disproportionately unlikely, then you won't have read this, so you can see it here on YouTube now. The issue of confirmation bias, of one's propensity to look for substantiating evidence to support what is on occasion atypical lived experience, where painting rare situations and incidents as endemic and or as unjustifiably and inaccurately proportionately normalised, or alternatively, using pre-existing cultural prejudicial stereotypes, essentially presenting opinion as a basis for fact, can leave people like Elon Musk as open to critique from the court of public opinion as other extremists that deploy radical judgment as part of their doctrine-based stance, such as Mohammed Atta or Mustafa Kemal Mustafa, aka Abu Hamza al-Masri. Abu Hamza al-Masri is a guy with a hook on his hand who's a very popular radical Islamist who's had a lot of coverage in the UK media. Mohammed Atta was one of the terrorists involved in the attacks on the Twin Towers, and they're both very well known and very well discriminated against by various people who use, you know, radical judgment, and you know, and they would argue rightly so. They all argue rightly so. As objective bystanders, attempting to decipher the vast canyon between things presented in articles like this. This is an article that says that sex abuse gangs view white girls as worthless and trash. So this is basically suggesting that ethnic minority sex abuse gangs are racist against white people. Elon Musk has recently been sticking up very much for people who, in South Africa, there's a lot of genocide against white farmers. My family were from Kenya. My dad had several brothers and sisters. I've only ever met one of my uncles. They were called Vicky, Flora, Tori, Torquay, Jonna, and Jackie, I think, and Diorsa, my father. There was 8 brothers and sisters of the Bidwell family and the McLeod family that had a farm where they bred horses, which they sold to the Queen for her silver jubilee, and they grew sugarcane, which apparently when they sold to Tate and Lyle in the 70s was about 50% of Tate and Lyle's total holdings. But anyway, that's a massive digression. This story, about sex abuse gangs viewing white girls as worthless and trash, paints a picture of one kind of polarised end of a debate, which might make people sort of feel that people of ethnic minorities are embodying that racism. I mean, if I was an ethnic minority who'd been oppressed by the British Empire and white people for the last 200 years and had that as a cultural idiom of my sort of personal identity, then I might kind of maybe have those pre-installed filters as well. Like I've been to Africa, I've been to Senegal with my girlfriend in my 20s, and I've been the only white person on the bus, and I know what that feels like, and I hadn't ever experienced that for a long time. Anyway, my article goes on to say, my Facebook post, which probably you haven't seen, after that article says, compared to that article, totally contradictory coverage like this, which is a Guardian article, which says that most child sex abuse gangs made up of white men, according to the Home Office. So, yeah, Jamie Grierson here, Home Affairs correspondent, is saying that the majority of child sex abuse gangs are made up of white men under the age of 30, according to an official paper. And that was in 2020. So you've got kind of two opposing articles here. This one which says, that ethnic minorities prejudicially abuse and assault vulnerable people using racial motives. And then you've got this article which sort of says almost that, or whilst that might be true, they could both be true, but they sort of cancel each other out. They're sort of opposames in a sense. They could both be allegorically, factually accurate, both be contextually put into somebody's viewpoint. But majoritively, people who read the top article might look down on somebody of an ethnic minority with a kind of proportionate bias based on their views being formed on the opinions of the author or the journalist who's written that article. And the people who read this article in ethnic minorities might look at white people and say, well, look, most of the child sex abuse gangs are made up of white men under 30. So, what are we being discriminated against for, or labelled as kind of like socially degraded or destructive? I went on to write, it sort of places one in not just an ethical no man's land, whereas people who are aware that human rights abuses take place and so feel we must dutifully form educated opinions on their motives, but a moral hamster wheel so cyclical, contradictory, and at its worst grossly disproportionately misinformed that it's almost more akin to a Zorb ball, where the well-intentioned seeker of truth is left with vast swathes of seemingly well-evidenced and substantiated but opposing viewpoints in which to turn support, which in turn support opposing narratives on highly emotively charged issues, ones which force us to take a stand and opt to be in one proportionate opinionated demographic or another. There's typos, but every time I edit it, then it has to delete the post, so who gives a shit? We're all confronted with so much contradictive journalism, sometimes skewed statistical and factual representations of situations, and ultimately vast swathes of well-meaning people on differing sides of a debate, so often presenting their opinions as fact. And I guess the most pertinent thing is that people's opinions, are often essentially just other people's opinions in the first place. A bit like the people who might have read those, two articles and polarised themselves. Here's some quotes that I got from Googling the transient nature of truth. The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Truth has come and falsehood has departed. Indeed, is falsehood by nature ever bound to depart? So the truth will always out, it's saying. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Truth is such a transient thing. That was a pretty salient quote from Google. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. And on a totally different but equally poignant note, I read this recently and it really resonated with me. Whoever abandoned you in the middle of the ocean has no right to know what the sharks did to you or how you managed to make it to the shore. In my recent psychology session, we discussed the metaphor of why when a snake bites you, you don't, or arguably shouldn't, chase it through the undergrowth, trying to prove that you didn't deserve it or ask why it did it. Yeah, we bounced that around for a bit, actually. I'm going to leave snakes, journalists and bipartisanship to the will of a God I don't believe in for now, and have my dinner on Hayward Ward, which may or may not contain meat, depending on whether the administrative selection of patient menu options has, on this occasion, been proportionately and properly completed. The truth is out there, but for the minute, we're all still locked in here. And there's another AI generated image. I love AI. I made a video yesterday to say that Amazon Alexa Plus had just come out on the 4th, which AI told me was wrong. I've got an Alexa Plus, but I can't connect it to the Wi-Fi because you need to have a browser window that pops up to put in the guest credentials on the Wi-Fi here in the hospital. And the IT guys maybe is going to help me out on Monday, so I don't know what we're going to do with my Alexa Echo Dot 5th gen. Said it was the newest gen, but I really want Alexa Plus because it has generative AI, and I've got no mates or family really, very many anyway, to discuss things with. So I like AI. It's good chatting with AI, good chatting with you. Not that I'll probably get any comments on this video except for trolls, and probably won't get any more views than there is number of minutes, which right now is 21 and 18 seconds. But I hope you have a great day. I hope that if you see a doctor, he gives you your GMC verification details if you ask for them, because it's a bit unnerving when they don't. And I hope you don't have to resort to getting a photo ID with your name on it if you go to a psych ward, because you need to kind of like ironically or paradoxically parody the idea that everyone seems to be dressing themselves to be descriptively similar to yourself when you're questioning the lawful nature of your detention and your own perception, views or kind of judgments, be they based on journalism, AI articles, your own opinion or lived experience, because all of those things can lead us down different paths where we don't always see eye to eye, but the truth is not malleable and a lie doesn't become true no matter how many times you repeat it. So at 22 minutes 35, I wish you a really good day and all the best for this sunny and beautiful month ahead of us for everyone, whether I know you or I don't know you from a bar of soap. I wish you all the best.